Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is MCCORMICK, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my Week 15 waiver wire targets for the 2024 fantasy football season. Now, first and foremost, if you're watching this episode, congratulations. You have made it to the fantasy football playoffs, and it has been quite the journey. Now, going into this week, in our upcoming matchups, we all know that we're going to be starting our studs. We're going to start the players that got us here. But many of us may not have those players available due to injuries. This most recent week, players like BRYCE Hall, Kenneth Walker, Ladd McConkey, George Pickens going down with injuries late in the week. These aren't even early week injuries in which you could prepare for them in terms of picking up their backups. But going into today, we're going to be talking about players at a variety of different positions, the best available running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, quarterbacks, kickers, and defenses in order to prepare for our Week 15 matchups. These are players that are widely available in many leagues that hopefully can not only help you capture a victory in Week 15 in order to advance, but hopefully help you for the remainder of the fantasy football season in order to become a 2024 fantasy football champion. Now, as we progress throughout today's episode, I want to remind you, if you're looking for my thoughts on a specific player, travel down to the description of the video. Down in the description, there are timestamps available like in every single video. While you're down there, if you have not yet already, be sure to subscribe to the channel, click the bell notification button, because besides the daily content, we're also live streaming every single day. Later tonight, after the Monday Night Football game between the Cincinnati Bengals and Dallas Cowboys, I will be live here on the channel. If you have any questions regarding Week 15 and beyond, be sure to swing on by. I'm more than happy to help. Also, speaking of tonight's game between the Cincinnati Bengals and Dallas Cowboys, at the end of today's video, like I do every single Monday, I will be putting together a couple entries via Underdog. For those of you who are trying to tail those upcoming entries, be sure to go ahead, check out the link down in the description, head on over to Underdog, use code Andrew, and make that first time deposit minimum of $10, because not only will you be able to claim that first time deposit offer, tail the picks, but also get my rankings sent to you every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. These rankings being by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, all encompassing rankings. So for those of you who are interested in taking advantage of the opportunity, check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility today based on your current location. If you are not eligible, you've used my code or somebody else's code in the past, you can always find rankings via Patreon, link also down in the description. Thank you very much. All right, let's go ahead and begin by talking about the running back position. And in my opinion, the number one priority running back, Patrick Taylor Jr., running back of the San Francisco 49ers. So besides Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason now being placed on the injured reserve as of last week, we have Patrick Taylor Jr., who is currently only rostered in 4% of Yahoo leagues, 8% of sleeper leagues, as the backup of Isaac Guerendo. And you may be wondering, well, why are we talking about the backup of Isaac Guerendo? Because unfortunately, Isaac Guerendo in the fourth quarter of yesterday's game against the Chicago Bears sustained a foot injury. And going into this week, you may think, all right, well, if they're going to play on Sunday, he may have a full week of rest in order to prepare for that game and may end up playing. Well, you would be right, but unfortunately, they play on Thursday. Therefore, if we're going to be in a situation in which Isaac Guerendo is going to miss the Thursday night contest as the San Francisco 49ers take on the LA Rams, Patrick Taylor Jr. will be the next man up. And like I've talked about all season long, and I'll continue to harp, regardless of who plays running back for the San Francisco 49ers, the value that they have is ridiculous. Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, Isaac Guerendo have been incredible this season. Even if you put Elijah Mitchell back there, who's been hurt all season long, it does not matter. Patrick Taylor will be able to deliver for many of our fantasy teams. He is the immediate number one pickup in play in the event in which Isaac Guerendo is not available to play this upcoming Thursday against the Rams. Then we move on to the next running back. We have Sincere McCormick for another consecutive week. We have Alexander Madison inactive. And if we're going to be in a situation in which this team wants to continue to prepare and elevate Sincere McCormick to being the starting running back, they'll continue to keep Alexander Madison inactive for the remainder of the season alongside of Zamir White. So if that's going to continue to be the case, I mean, Sincere McCormick in the last 2 weeks has been relevant in terms of fantasy purposes, has been great in terms of his overall efficiency, in terms of yards per carry on average, currently only rostered in 15% of Yahoo leagues, 19% of sleeper leagues. For those of you who need a starting running back who's going to get themselves about 15 to 17 touches in a game, going into this week's matchup, I would expect, again, taking on the Atlanta Falcons is not a difficult thing. Even with a backup quarterback, expecting it to be Desmond Ridder taking on the Atlanta Falcons, his former team, a revenge game. Sincere McCormick should still be of value considering the Atlanta Falcons offense has not produced well, and considering that it will be a closer overall contest, which will keep the running game alive, and Sincere McCormick's value at an all-time high. Moving on to our number 3, we have Isaiah Davis. Now, this is purely dependent on whether or not someone like BRYCE Hall is going to return this week. In the event in which BRYCE Hall does not return, I would say that Isaiah Davis even has more value this week than someone like Sincere McCormick as a starting option based on his overall utilization and opportunity share over the last 2 games. Now, this most recent game, Isaiah Davis, 10 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown on the ground, 6 targets, 3 receptions, 27 receiving yards. When you're able to get yourself all that volume of opportunity on the ground and through the air, alongside of Braylon Allen, who is continuing to get himself 10 plus touches as well. A guy like Isaiah Davis, currently only rostered in 11% of leagues on Yahoo, 15% on Sleeper. If we're going to be in a situation in which he continues to play at this high of a rate, in the absence of BRYCE Hall, again, remember, Braylon Allen only played 31 snaps yesterday. You know, Isaiah Davis played a total of 30 snaps. 1 snap difference is not a big deal. This is a two-headed monster, and going forward, as Isaiah Davis continues to be the preferred goal line, short yardage, and third down back of this offense, he will continue to have value in the absence of Breece Hall. The next running back I wanted to mention is Sean Tucker. Now, for those of us who are Bucky Irving managers, we all noticed that unfortunately, he only played 7 snaps yesterday. Bucky Irving obviously was banged up going into the game, but unfortunately left early due to the said injury. But Sean Tucker, even though you would expect him to be the next man up, really wasn't given much opportunity either. Rachaad White was the entire backfield in his most recent performance against the Las Vegas Raiders. Sean Tucker only played 8 snaps himself. But going into this week, if we're going to be in a situation in which Bucky Irving is going to outright miss this game, Sean Tucker, as the RB2 of this offense, will certainly have enough value to potentially be a viable option at a top 40 capacity, closer to number 40. Because again, Rachaad White is going to be the primary 3-down back of this offense. And once again, this most recent week proved that he can handle all the workload and be highly efficient in those overall opportunities. But going forward, if Bucky Irving is going to miss time, Sean Tucker is someone that we may want to address in terms of picking up. The next player I wanted to mention at the running back position is Justice Hill, who's coming off of the bye week. The fact of the matter is, the only reason I am suggesting Justice Hill is because the Baltimore Ravens take on the New York Giants. In the event in which the New York Giants get blown out, as they should, unlike the Saints were able to accomplish yesterday, once they are blowing out the Giants by a touchdown lead, there will be opportunities for Justice Hill to come into the game and run out the clock and find himself individual success within the upcoming performance. And then we move on to the final running back option, JALEEL McLaughlin. This is in the most desperate of situations that you would pick up and play JALEEL McLaughlin. Currently only rostered in 13% of Yahoo leagues, 16% of sleeper leagues. Understand that the only reason I would ever be starting him is if I'm playing in a 16 to 18 to 20 man league, quite frankly, because the Denver Broncos backfield is a running back by committee situation. And even though the most recent performance, JALEEL McLaughlin had 14 rushing attempts for 80 plus rushing yards, I expect it to go back to its norm of getting the touches in the direction of Javonte Williams, as it typically has. Over the course of the season, we have seen weeks in which Javonte plays well, or Audric Estime plays well, or JALEEL McLaughlin plays well, but it all goes back to being a running back by committee situation, regardless of the solid matchup this week against the Indianapolis Colts. All right, moving on to the wide receiver conversation. Let's begin with our number 1. We have Cedric Tillman. Now, before I get into talking about Cedric Tillman, I do want to remind you, if players such as the following are still available: Adam Thielen, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, those should be already rostered, and please do yourself the favor and pick them up first and foremost. Now, if those players are already taken, potentially you can go ahead and pick up someone like Cedric Tillman, who has missed each of the last 2 games due to the concussion protocol. We would assume that eventually he's going to be returning from the concussion protocol, and considering the upcoming schedule for the Cleveland Browns offense, as they're taking on Kansas City, Cincinnati, and Miami in the next 3 games, you would assume that Cedric Tillman, once healthy, will be of value for fantasy purposes as another receiving option in this offense that could get themselves a lot of upside. Considering how well Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku, and Elijah Moore have played over the course of the last 3 weeks, Cedric Tillman, once he returns, could certainly make an immediate impact within this offense. The number 2 being Quentin Johnston. Look, the only reason I wanted to mention Quentin Johnston at this point is because if, in fact, Ladd McConkey is going to continue to miss time due to his injury, of course, Quentin Johnston, like he did last night, could continue to score touchdowns within this offense. It is a high-powered offense that, again, at times has not found themselves the most total upside, but in the lack of a running game, we will get more opportunities for Justin Herbert to throw the ball within the upcoming matchups. So if, in fact, Ladd McConkey is going to miss time, once again, Quentin Johnston will become an automatic start, very similar to someone like Josh Palmer, who we'll mention in just a moment. Then we move on to our number 3, Ray-Ray McCloud, who in the last 2 games has put up performances of 95 and 98 receiving yards. He's had himself 17 targets and 2 rushing attempts, 19 total opportunities in the last 2 games. As long as those opportunities continue to go in his direction, this week's matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders being an advantageous one, he could be a pick up and play for those of you who are desperate and in need of a play. Moving on to our number 4, we have DEMARIO Douglas. Again, coming off of the bye week, he is a PPR machine in terms of targets and receptions. If he's able to find himself with 6 catches, 60 yards, for those of you who play in a full PPR, could very easily be a wide receiver 3 option or a potential flex if you're dealing with many of injuries. Then we have Brandin Cooks as a number 5. The fact of the matter is he should be the number 3 receiving option of this offense behind CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson. Then it should be Brandin Cooks. And considering the upcoming matchups for the Dallas Cowboys offense, we should see a lot of Brandin Cooks opportunities go in his direction. So if you are looking to potentially utilize him in future weeks, you could pick him up before tonight's game in preparation for weeks 15 and beyond. Then we have Josh Palmer as the final option. Again, in the event in which Ladd McConkey is going to miss time, Josh Palmer played incredibly well last night with the opportunities that he was given, and again, is widely available in many of leagues. Now, a couple honorable mentions that I do want to go ahead and go over at the wide receiver position before we move on to tight end revolve around guys like Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, both of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, finding themselves immense value this most recent week, taking on the Chargers this upcoming week in a high-scoring game. They could easily still have value. And someone like Wan'Dale Robinson, who's coming off a performance of 11 total targets. Again, the quarterback position is not ideal for the New York Giants and has not been relatively efficient with the overall opportunities, but nonetheless, Wan'Dale Robinson could still be a potential play in a full PPR scoring format. All right, let's move on to the tight end conversation. First and foremost, if the top three players, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, and Dalton Schultz, are somehow still available because they were dropped in this most recent week because they were all on bye, please do yourself a favor and prioritize them as the following: Ertz 1, Henry 2, Schultz 3. Now, in the event in which they're all already rostered, as they should be, Juwan Johnson will be the next man up. Now, Juwan Johnson is going to be a little bit of an iffy play because we all know that currently Derek Carr is dealing with an injury that could end up forcing him to miss a lot of weeks. In the event in which that does take place, Juwan Johnson is going to have to rely upon the backup quarterback of the New Orleans Saints that earlier this season, regardless of who it was, have not played well. Going back to week 6 through 8 with a backup quarterback, the Saints tight ends were getting themselves 6 targets, 4.3 receptions, 68.7 receiving yards per game, about 9.03 fantasy points per game. Considering Juwan Johnson is coming off of a game of 4 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown, 13 fantasy points, there's still a possibility that he could sustain fantasy value even in the absence of Derek Carr, but it certainly will be more difficult going forward. Then we have Grant Calcaterra, one of our hidden gems for week 14, who found himself in the end zone luckily. Again, it was very much so a hidden gem, but he found himself with 9.1 fantasy points and a half PPR scoring from at double-digit fantasy points once again in a full PPR. Considering Dallas Goedert is on the injured reserve, this is still a player that going into the upcoming matchups will have value considering how much Kellen Moore wants to implement the tight end position within this Philadelphia Eagles offense. And then we move on to our final option, Daniel Bellinger. Considering Theo Johnson, the rookie tight end of the New York Giants, is out for the remainder of the season, Bellinger is coming off of his most recent performance of 7 targets, 5 catches, 45 yards, and 7.0 fantasy points, 9.5 in a full PPR scoring format. If we're going to be in a situation in which, of course, Daniel Bellinger is going to be exposed to a greater share of opportunity, again, he's available in 100% of Yahoo leagues, 97% of sleeper leagues. Again, if you're looking to potentially pick him up and play him, you must be in a desperate position because there are many of tight ends out there that I'm sure are better options. All right, let's move on to the quarterback conversation with our top 6, beginning with number 1, Matthew Stafford. I want to first and foremost say, as a Rams fan, that was the best game that I have seen Matthew Stafford play with a Rams jersey on, by far and away. That was one of the best games the Rams have played over the last couple years. They were 12 of 16 on 3rd and 4th downs combined. A 75% success rate on 3rd and 4th downs is ridiculous. But nonetheless, able to steal a victory and now have it go ahead and do so once again this upcoming Thursday, taking on their division rival in the San Francisco 49ers. That should also be a high-scoring game considering how well Brock Purdy had played on Sunday's game against the Chicago Bears, a great secondary. This is going to be a very competitive game. If somehow, some way, Matthew Stafford is available in your league in order to pick him up and potentially play him, in the event in which your quarterback is not a reliable enough play, could be an option. Aaron Rodgers, another one of these pick up and plays. Again, Aaron Rodgers continues to play well for fantasy purposes. But the fact of the matter is he takes on the Jacksonville Jaguars. They cannot stop the run or the pass. Therefore, regardless of the situation, Aaron Rodgers continues to play well. We're going to hope that he finds himself in the end zone 2 times minimum, and he's able to get himself his 220 plus passing yards that will go ahead and make him a fantasy relevant option. Then we move on to Jameis Winston. Look, going forward, Jameis Winston is going to continue to be this high upside or, unfortunately, the interception machine that we all know and love. The fact of the matter is the upcoming weeks, taking on the Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals, Miami Dolphins, they're quite solid matchups, to be totally honest. All 3 of these games should be events in which they're continuing to score and have themselves a lot of potential for upside, especially with the return, potentially, of Cedric Tillman within the upcoming week. Then we move on to Drake May. Again, coming off of the bye week, should be a value taking on the Arizona Cardinals. That defense, again, most recently had not looked great, specifically against the Seattle Seahawks. Drake May will have the opportunity to try to expose them, but his rushing upside is really what makes him of value going into this week. Then we have Cooper Rush. Prior to tonight's game, you could pick him up if you want to play him against Carolina next week, or you could potentially even pick up Bryce Young taking on the Dallas Cowboys. That matchup should be an exciting one as neither team will play defense and both of them will continue to score offensively, which should be exciting for fantasy purposes. All right, let's move on to the kicker and defensive conversation. To close out today's video, short and sweet, we have Matthew Wright as our number 1 kicker. Again, I want to mention first and foremost, if someone like Jaime Fairbairn or Will Lutz this most recent week because of their bye weeks were dropped, they should probably be prioritized, especially Jaime Fairbairn. But if Matthew Wright is available coming off of back-to-back weeks of 14 and 16 fantasy points, you would assume, considering this Chiefs offense has purely become a field goal, machine, that he should be a number 1 pickup, especially for those of you who are in desperate need of a consistent kicker. Then we move on to Will REICHARD, currently rostered in 8% of Yahoo and sleeper leagues. Again, this most recent performance only scored 6 fantasy points, primarily because 5 touchdowns. it's not going to be a touchdown every possession kind of game going forward, especially within this upcoming matchup against the Bears at home. I'd expect Will Riker to be a solid play within the upcoming matchup. Then we move on to Anders Carlson, who's coming off of a fantastic week of 16 plus fantasy points, 2 of the last 3 games consisting of 11 plus fantasy points, taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars with the opportunity on hand. I expect him to score at least 2 field goals, maybe a couple PATs at a base minimum 8 fantasy points max. We're getting ourselves into the double-digit range, which is fantastic. Now let's move on to the defensive conversation. Again, I want to mention, if in fact somehow, some way, the Baltimore Ravens defense, Denver Broncos defense, perhaps even the New York Jets defense are available in your league, they should be prioritized. But in the event in which they are not, we talk about defenses that are widely available. For example, the Washington Commanders, currently only rostered in 22% of Yahoo leagues, 30% of sleeper leagues. They take on the Saints this week without Derek Carr. The last 3 games in which defenses have taken on the Saints without Derek Carr, they have put up 17, 20, and 12 points as fantasy defenses. The Washington Commanders should be a fantastic play within the upcoming matchup. Then we move on once again to the Arizona Cardinals. Again, unfortunately, the Arizona Cardinals this most recent week didn't have the greatest fantasy defensive performance, but the 3 weeks prior had double-digit fantasy points every single game out. And now that they take on the New England Patriots, over the course of the last 3 games have allowed 9 fantasy points per game on average to opposing defenses. The expectation is that the Arizona Cardinals should once again be a solid play within this week and next week's matchup. Then we have the Atlanta Falcons, who take on the Las Vegas Raiders. This is going to be a revenge game for Desmond Ridder, but the fact of the matter is taking on Desmond Ridder should not be a difficult matchup, especially considering the Raiders have allowed 8 fantasy points per game on average over the course of the last month of the season to opposing fantasy defenses. This should be a solid pickup and play for those of you who are in need of a defensive option as a streamer. And that's going to cover it in regards to our waiver wire pickup. Short, easy, simple. We know that we're starting our studs. In the event in which you have injuries or inconsistency of play, you can look to some of these members, but hopefully we're going to keep our rosters healthy. We're not going to find ourselves in late week situations just like this most recent week in which we're scrambling in order to pick up a backup for guys like BRYCE Hall, Kenneth Walker, Pickens, Ladd McConkey, etc. Either way, with this all covered, let's go ahead and close out today's video with a couple entries via Underdog that I like going into tonight's game between the Cincinnati Bengals and Dallas Cowboys. Let's check that out right now. All right, so let's go ahead and first and foremost begin by talking about the Dallas Cowboys receiving options that could have themselves a lot of success. First and foremost, let's talk about CeeDee Lamb. Over the course of the last 3 healthy games in which he has played with Cooper Rush, he has got himself over 6 receptions in every single one of those games. I would anticipate a high volume of overall target opportunity once again, double digits within that range as long as he's able to stay healthy. Within this game, that should be a high-scoring event between these two teams, considering neither team can play defense within the secondary, and considering they'll have to keep up with the high-powered Cincinnati Bengals offense. I would assume that 6 receptions for CeeDee Lamb is very much so capable of being accomplished. Now, another receiving option that I like within the Dallas Cowboys offense, over the course of the last couple of weeks, we have seen the tight end position get a lot of utilization, but this has been in the absence of Jake Ferguson. Going into this week in his final return, I do expect him to surpass 3.5 receptions, and I'll tell you exactly why. The Dallas Cowboys take on the Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends since week 6. They've allowed the following statistics to opposing tight ends in the last 4 games. Las Vegas, 7 catches, 67 and a touchdown. Baltimore, 7 catches, 72 and a touchdown. Los Angeles Chargers, 5 for 86 and a touchdown. Pittsburgh, 9 for 99 and a touchdown. Tight ends have dominated against this defense. Jake Ferguson is next, especially considering the tight end position within this offense between weeks 11 through 13 have been targeted 9.3 times per game, which has led to 7 receptions per game on average. 3.5 receptions for Jake Ferguson should be a cakewalk. Now that I've covered the players on the Cowboys that I like going into today's game, I want to talk about some of the Cincinnati Bengals. Specifically, let's begin with T. Higgins, going higher on his receiving yards. I'm going to take him higher than 59.5. He has been able to accomplish this in 5 of the last 5 games within this offense. As long as he's healthy, he's continuing to get himself an ample share of opportunity. Another player that I like within this offense is, of course, Chase Brown, surpassing his rushing yard total of 59.5. Again, the Dallas Cowboys run-stop defense has not been great thus far this season. I would expect all 4 of these plays to potentially be great. I'm going to go ahead and put together a $25 entry in order to 3x the overall entry. Again, I think these are very much so capable numbers for all these options to be able to succeed within. Now, there could be many of other plays that you could put together. For example, the idea of putting in Jamar Chase within a overall entry here to score a touchdown should probably take place, especially considering we've mentioned it. He has scored a touchdown in each of the last 3 games. He has scored 13 touchdowns in the last 10 games total. As long as this man continues to dominate at this rate, of course, an anytime touchdown should be implicated within his overall performance within the upcoming week. Again, you can pair that up with any of the players that I went ahead and suggested earlier. For example, if I was feeling really confident about it, which I am, I just go ahead and I'll take the 5.5 receptions again, and I'll just put in this entry outright within the 2 of them. I'll take the 2x multiplier, and also set a ride, because again, I do believe that Ja'Marr Chase finding himself in the end zone is very much so capable. Either way, if you guys want to go ahead and put together your own entries via Underdog, again, check out the link down in the description. Use code Andrew today. Make that first time deposit. Get that deposit match. Of course, be able to take advantage of the rankings every single Sunday morning. That'll cover it for today. I'll be back tomorrow talking about my top 40 running back rankings for the beginning of the fantasy football playoffs. And do not forget, later tonight, after the game between the Cincinnati Bengals and Dallas Cowboys, I will be live here on the channel. Thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.